Hello students, and welcome to day 3 of Practical English for Finance and Banking. Make sure that you have your notebooks out and something to write with so that we can go over the exercises that you had from our previous class. Remember that last time we talked about how to write numbers with words, and of course we went through this handout in great detail. If you need to review that video to go over that, please do so. We also talked about the place value chart, where it shows us how to read or say all of the numbers, especially with large numbers and very small numbers with fractions. We have the decimal point here, and we have the ones, tens, hundreds, and then if we go beyond that, we need a comma here after those 3 spaces. And that takes us to the thousands, 10,000s, 100,000s, another comma before we get to the millions, 10 millions, 100 millions, billions, 10 billions, 100 billions, trillions, quadrillions, and quintillions. For every group of 3, for the thousands, 10,000s, 100,000s, for every group of 3 there, we need a comma separating them. Now be very careful here that you don't confuse the way that you read numbers in English with the way that you read them in Korean. Of course, in Korean, you normally do large numbers in multiples of 10,000. Like if you're counting money, you do mon won, 10,000 won. So be very careful with that, because in English, it's very different. Okay, we don't do that. And sometimes I'll see people write something like this. Where they'll write 10,000, but they'll write it as 1 mon, basically. Now that is extremely confusing, because it's impossible to tell if there's simply an extra 0 at the end, or if they've just got the comma in the wrong place. So be very, very careful with that you both read and write numbers correctly. So with that previous handout, with how to write numbers with words, with the spelling, the punctuation with hyphens and with commas, make sure that you go through that very carefully. Review that if you need to. Go back and watch that video, as well as the video for the place value chart. So you had some homework last time in your notebooks. I asked you to write these numbers, and I wasn't very specific here because I wanted to give you some choices. I didn't say whether to write them all in digits, numerals, digits or numerals, the numbers themselves, numerals, digits, or using only figures like this, or whether I wanted you to write them in words only. So we're going to do both. So let's take a look at these. If you only did them in digits, you did not write them in words, pause the video and go back and do that. Or if you've only written them in words without putting them in digits, or whichever way I said that, if you've only done it one way or the other, pause the video here, go back and complete that before you look at the answers here. Okay, so let's start with 3.1 billion. Now that's a simple way to read it, 3.1 billion. And if you see that written in relation to dollars or people or something like that, that is normally how we would read it, 3.1 billion. However, it's important to know how to write that just in numbers and just in words. So if we want to write it in numbers, it would be 3 followed by a comma, then 100 followed by a comma, 3 zeros, comma, 3 zeros. How do we know that? Well, here are the ones, tens, and hundreds places. This would be thousands. 3 more zeros would give us millions, and billions. So 3.1 billion would look like this. Okay. Now, if we want to write it only in words, we would write 3 billion. Remember, we use a comma here, just like we did here. 3 billion 100 thousands and millions. So 3 billion 100 million. 3 billion 100 million, we don't need any dashes here. No hyphens. Okay? 3 billion, comma, 100 million. 725 million. If we want to write that only in numbers, it would look like this. 725, comma, followed by 6 zeros. 6 zeros will give us millions, because the first 3 is thousands. If you have another 3 zeros, that's millions. 725 million, 725, followed by a comma, 3 zeros, a comma, and 3 more zeros. If we want to write it in words only, 725 million. 700, there's no hyphen here, there's no dash, but when we write the 25, remember 25, there is a dash here, there is a hyphen. Okay, so pay a careful attention to that you follow that procedure or that practice. Okay, 725 million. 725 million. 4 trillion. 4 trillion. How many zeros is that going to be? Well, if you have 3 zeros, you have 4,000. 3 more zeros, you have 4 million. 4 billion. Thousand, million, billion. Trillion, we need 3 more zeros. 4,000, million, billion, trillion. 4 trillion. If we want to write that only in words, very simple. Very easy. 4 trillion. Okay? Hope those make sense to you. Now, those were pretty simple. Okay? Let's look at something a little more complicated. I just did something very simple here. I wrote 987654321.0123345. Now, if you want to write this correctly, and you want to convert this into words, how would you do that? Well, obviously we don't have any commas here, okay? So that makes it much more difficult to read. So first thing we want to do is insert commas where they are needed. So every 3 spaces here, so between the 3 and the 2, 3 spaces, between the 6 and the 5, 3 spaces, between the 9 and the 8. Remember that even though we have a lot of numbers here to the right of the decimal point, we do not write any commas here. Okay? So if we rewrite that, it would look like this. 9 with a comma, 876, comma, 543, comma, 210.0123345. Now, how do we read that? Well, first of all, this would be thousands, millions, billions. So, let's break it up here. We've got 9 in this group, 9 billion, 876,543,210. Point, and then all of this part is the fraction, a part of 1. So, if we convert that to words, and notice the color coding here, we have 9 billion, 876,543,210. When we get to the decimal point, that's where we say the word and to indicate it's a fraction. Now, how do we read this? Well, we read it just like it's a number. So we have 12,345, and that is tenths, hundredths, thousandths, 10 thousandths, 100 thousandths, millionths. So we have 12,345 millionths. Now, obviously, this is a mix of digits, numbers, and words. If we want to write it only in words, and I will ask you to do that on quizzes or exams, I will have you take a number like this, and I will tell you to write it in words. So this is what you'll need to do. 9 billion. 9 billion. Remember, there's a comma here, so we need to have a comma here, we need to have a comma here. 9 billion, 876 million. Remember 76, we have to have the dash here, the hyphen. 543,000, again 43, we have the hyphen. 210, 210, there is no hyphen here. There's no comma after this. 210, and, indicating the decimal point, and 12,345 millionths. 45 does have a hyphen. Now, when we write 12,345, we can use a comma here. Okay? Be careful with the pronunciation here. It's not millions, but millionths. Notice there is an S here. Okay? Millionths on this very last one, the unit. But up here, when we say 9 billion, 876 million, 543,000, remember there are no S's here. Okay? No S's here, or here, or here. Okay? So be very careful with that. It's very specific, it's very detailed, but if you want to write them and say them correctly, that's what you should follow. Okay? So I hope this one makes sense to you. This is obviously a rather large number, and when it's time to take a quiz or a test, I will give you some questions where you have to go both directions. Sometimes I'll give you the number, the numerals, and I'll tell you to write it in words. That's where you need to do all of this, okay? Or I might give you something like this and tell you to write it as a number, and you have to go the other direction. Of course, you wouldn't want to do this. You'd want to do it this way, make sure you have the commas, and of course the decimal point in the correct places. Okay? So, in your notebooks, I would like you to write some large numbers. Write some small numbers if you want to start off with, write some bigger numbers, and then write some really, really big numbers. Sometimes you can put 3 or 4 zeros all in a row and see what happens there. For example, if you have something like this. How do you read this? Oh, I need another digit there. How would you read this? This is thousands. This is millions. How many millions are there? 123 million. How many thousands are there? None. How do we read that? We don't say 0 thousands. We simply leave it out. We don't say anything. Okay, this is nothing. So we would say 123 million, 542. 123 million, 542. Okay? So practice writing some smaller numbers, some bigger numbers. Put your commas in the correct places. Do some with decimals. And practice with those. Converting these from numbers, from digits, into words. And then go the other direction. Write some in words, and then convert them, switch them into numbers. digits or numerals. Okay. Now, normally in class, if we were live, I would have you write these down and then give them to another student, and then you would have to write what they wrote. You would have to convert their number into words. Since we're doing this online right now, we can't do that. So I'm going to ask you to practice at home. Okay, so if you want to pause the video here and practice with that, go ahead and work on that for a little while, just like we would in class. And then when you are finished and you want to move on with the rest of the video, press play again. Okay, now that you've had some time to practice, let's move on to our next topic for today. For this class, I do have a book that we will use. It is called Check Your English Vocabulary for Banking and Finance. Now this, it's a vocabulary workbook, but it is based on banking and finance. And it's more of a workbook. It's not exactly a textbook. It has more exercises in it without a lot of reading or chapters or explanation. But it does involve a lot of good vocabulary. Now, unfortunately, this book is a little old, so that makes it very difficult to find. However, I do have a PDF version of this book that I have uploaded to Blackboard, so you can access it there. And of course, I will be putting the pages that we are using into these PowerPoint slides so you can also see them there. Okay? So you don't need to worry about trying to find it in a bookstore or purchase it or something. You might be able to find it online, and if you want to, that's great. Support the author and the publisher. But if you cannot find it, don't worry. You do have a PDF file. Okay, so if we look at the table of contents here, you'll see there's about 30 chapters. Okay, we will not do all 30 chapters. Okay, basically we will do, let me zoom in on this a little bit. Basically we're going to do about the first 5 or 6 chapters, and we will do about the last 5 or 6 chapters. Okay, and we will not do them in this order. We're not going to start with chapter 1. Okay, so we are actually going to be starting with unit or chapter 27. I call them units because they're really small. Each one is just 2 pages, I believe. So it's not, like I said, there's not a lot of reading or something that you have to do. So they are pretty short. So if we look at Unit 27, it's dealing with numbers and statistics. Okay? And so you'll see here, Chapter 27, that actually begins on page 58 of the book. And each section is divided into about 3 or 4 parts usually. There's part A here, part B, and part A is matching, where you match the numbers with the phrases, the words. So the numbers here on the left, you match these with the correct phrase or words on the right, like we've just been doing. Of course, these involve some mathematical symbols, okay? So you need to make sure that you are familiar with those. Also, pay attention to the notes down here, some differences between American and British English, okay? This book is written more in British English. I speak American English, and in Korea, most English is taught with American English, with American pronunciation and spelling. It's not, of course there are British speakers, British English speakers in Korea, so you will hear different pronunciations, but in general, American English is more prominent, more popular here in Korea. So make sure you take a look at these notes down here at the bottom. Okay. Part B, it's also matching some mathematical expressions with the words that describe them. And then Part C, which is the second page, has some multiple choice questions. We call these multiple choice, which means there's more than one choice. Multiple means more than one. These are multiple choice. There are multiple choices. Normally you just choose one. Okay, but this would be called a multiple choice question. So choose A, B, C, D, or E. And this is the bottom part of the page. And that is the entire unit. So make sure you go through that, answer the questions carefully, and that will be your homework. Okay, so you've got a couple of things. You need to practice writing, converting from words to numbers, and from numbers to words. Okay, that's a really important skill that you need to have, and that will be something that I will be testing on your quizzes and exams. And then read through the exercises here in Unit 27 and complete those, and we will go through those in our next class. All right, have a good day, and I will see you in class 4.